Welcome back, friends. It's Friday, March 31st, and he's back.
I made it back.
He's back. It's like Voldemort. He's back. Yeah. He has been away for a couple of days, and it's good to have him back.
Thanks for covering for me.
Yeah, man. Rod stepped in. Rod did a great job.
I'm sure he did. Probably an upgrade.
We'll tell him you said that.
We'll
tell him you said that. We walked over the last couple of days in both a geographic sense and a timeline sense. We've kind of walked with Jesus. We went up to Caesarea Philippi for that conversation about who do people say that I am. We made our way back down to the Mount of Transfiguration, Mount Carmel, where Jesus was transfigured. Moses and Elijah show up. Peter, James, and John are blown away. They're thinking, man, this is good. This is what we've been looking for. And we heard that voice. And then we traveled down from north of Israel. We traveled down into the city of Jericho, the oldest city in the world, as Jesus passed through. And Matthew has Jesus recording all sorts of parables and teachings on the way. Just some of the most core teachings of Jesus were, again, recorded by Matthew in this last week and a half of Jesus' life.
And it is kind of fascinating that you cover 3 years in roughly 20 chapters.
Yeah.
And then the next 7 chapters take that week.
Last week.
Right, so a lot of teaching. Very, very teaching intensive for the last week.
So we are getting ready for what we refer to in the church as Palm or Passion Sunday, Palm/Passion Sunday this Sunday. So Steve, we want to walk today with our folks through what we typically call the triumphal entry story. Jesus enters into Jerusalem, and as recorded in Matthew chapter 21. So why don't you start us off with some insight as to what is the significance of this event?
In some ways, it's a parody, I think, of what would have been done earlier with the Romans. So Jerusalem, here it is, Passover, celebrating a small group of oppressed people overthrowing an empire, right? So that's the story of Moses. That's the last of the plagues that come upon Egypt, where the slaves overcome the masters. That's not a story that the Romans enjoy having told, right? So they want to show, they typically would come into Jerusalem at Passover with a show of force. They would move the garrison down from Caesarea at the sea, right, down to or rather from the coast up to Jerusalem as a show of force. They would have come in with their war horses. They would come in with their legions. They would come in with their spears and their swords. It's basically a way of saying, don't even think about trying this idea of revolt or rebellion. And so, that would have been quite a show of force.
And when we got to go to Israel just a couple weeks ago, and we visited a couple places where Herod around Jerusalem would have built his palaces, and just the absolute contrast between the show that Herod would have put on, these fabulous palaces, right, high, lofty places, and then contrasting with this little rather humble parade that Jesus puts on.
So Jesus comes in on a donkey. It's interesting in Matthew because Matthew's trying to be true to the prophecy of a donkey and a foal. And if you read Matthew, it's like it almost sounds like he's trying to ride both at the same time. And what Matthew's trying to do is be consistent with the prophecy. But either way, what it means is a humble. He comes in humbly, not on a war horse, but on a small animal, and almost to the point of absurdity. His feet would have probably almost drugged the ground as he rode. Wouldn't have been very impressive from a power dynamic. And it's the peasants, it's the common people, it's the cast-offs almost of society who are celebrating his entryway. Not the elites, not the powerful, but just the regular run-of-the-mill people. Yeah.
So again, Jesus, we believe, kind of makes his headquarters on the Mount of Olives. And on this Sunday, the Sunday we call Palm Sunday, Jesus would have made this procession down the hill, and we got to walk that path in 2014. We did it again, and it's really a steep path down through the Kidron Valley, kind of back up into this old town of Jerusalem. And as you make this walk down this pathway, it's real steep. There are all of these cemetery headstones, which are all kind of facing this eastern gate of the old city of Jerusalem.
Well, it's not even just headstones. If I remember it correctly, there are, because it's so different, they're tombs,
They're
right?
tombs. They're tombs. Yeah, that's a better word for it. And what's fascinating is every time someone visited one of those tombs, there was a tradition that you would place a pebble on top of that tombstone. And as Jesus makes his way down, the Bible records that people were telling him as they're waving the palm branches, as they're shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David, Hosanna," that many of the Pharisees were saying, "Tell your people to stop. This is inappropriate. This is not what you should be doing." And Jesus says, "I tell you, if they were to be silent, these very stones would cry out." And I absolutely think that that's the reference Jesus would have been making to those pebbles on top of those gravestones. And so it's a fascinating look, Steve.
And it's a way of him saying, you're not stopping this.
Right.
So why would the Pharisees want to stop that?
Well, there were so many different ways that this was going to incite problems for them and for the whole community. Again, anytime there was a messianic figure, anytime someone was, almost even daring to say that I'm the Messiah, it was going to stir up trouble.
Well, and the Pharisees, again, they have it pretty cozy. They are loosely aligned with the Romans. Not that they love the Romans, but it's kind of this agreement. You do your thing as long as there's no upheaval.
Right. Don't cause any problems, and we won't cause any problems for you.
Right.
But here Jesus is with, we can say, probably a motley band of disciples. Certainly, as Steve has already alluded to, not prestigious folks in the community, but kind of the hangers-oners.
And not even necessarily people in the community, because at Passover, the ultimate for a Jew would be to be in Jerusalem for Passover. And so typically the numbers would look something like population first century Jerusalem, maybe 70,000 people, and which is a decent size, 50, 70, somewhere in there, 50 to 70,000 people, which is a decent sized community, right? But at Passover, that population would swell as much as to 200, 250,000. So you've got all the relatives coming in. You're talking about everybody's cousin showing up to stay in your house. And you got all these people from the outlying districts, and it was a tinderbox, right? So you got people crowded into one space. You've already got tight living quarters, and then you've got people who are hoping for the Messiah to show up, to throw off the Romans. And then you've got the Pharisees and the temple folks who are trying to maintain order and control so that they don't arouse the wrath of the Romans. It is a recipe for an explosion.
One of the fascinating parts of the story for me is right at the beginning, where Jesus, he's coming from Jerusalem, he'd reached Bethphage, and going from the Mount of Olives, and he sends two disciples on ahead and says, go find for me this colt and this foal. So obviously Jesus knew that this was coming. He knew that this procession, this was his game plan for that Sunday, to make his way from the Mount of Olives down into Jerusalem. And so this parade may have lacked a permit, but it certainly he had made preparation for it.
Right. Yeah, and he knew what he was walking into. And I think one of the things that is overlooked is the courage that it would have taken for Jesus. Okay, he knows that he's not leaving that city. He knows this is going to be his physical end, and that he would have been familiar with the ways that the Romans would have handled things. He knew his death was coming, and not just a brutal death. And he still got on that donkey, and he still rode into town, facing head on the what Paul would call the powers and principalities of evil and oppression and injustice. It's all going to be unleashed upon him, and he goes anyway.
He walks right into the teeth of death, of what is going to face him. It's fascinating. As he comes down the hill, there are disciples who shout, and I want to get you to tell us, what is the word Hosanna when it says, Hosanna to the Son of David, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna in the highest heaven. Those are real messianic terms. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, if you go back and look at Isaiah's writings, right? It's the pronunciation of messiahship, right? We want to celebrate your kingdom. It's a way of acknowledging the kingship of Jesus, and that's a dangerous thing.
That's when there's already a king. You don't.
And that king happens to be Caesar, you don't claim to be king.
Right.
You've signed your death warrant.
Yeah.
And that's part of why they said, have them shut up. And Jesus is like, no, you're not going to stop this. This is the proclamation that all of creation will make.
So we will reenact, in some ways, we'll celebrate this day, this coming Sunday at Huntersville United Methodist Church. It's a Unity Sunday for us. We invite you to be here around 9:30. There will be refreshments. The children will help us process in and waving those palm branches, as is our tradition, shouting Hosanna to the Son of David. And we hope you'll come and join us. One service at 10 o'clock will include the service of Holy Communion. What's happening at Denver?
We are doing a similar thing. We're having a combined service at 10 a.m. And it'll be in the sanctuary. If we don't have enough room in the sanctuary, there will be overflow into the Family Life Center. What we want to be able to do is celebrate our children's ministry. The children will have a special part in the service, and also come together as one body. So 10 a.m., one service this Sunday.
So thank you for your time. Happy Friday, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Thank you.